Good afternoon, students. Today we are going to see a very important topic from the second unit, in which we are going to discuss mainly the formulation factors which are going to affect the drug product performance. Now, to understand this whole concept of the factors which are affecting the performance of drug or the dosage form, first let's try to understand that you all know that when we talk about a drug, for example, we have a particular drug, and if you want to convert this drug into a dosage form, what all is needed? So, firstly, we need a drug. Then, apart from that, we also need some additional agents to be incorporated into it, which are known as excipients. So, we can't imagine about a dosage form where we have not incorporated excipients. So first, let's try to see what do you mean by excipients. Now, excipients are added in a formulation for a very specific purpose. Now, what the purpose is all about? Now, whenever the excipients are added in the formulation, they are added with a special purpose so that they will provide a certain function. Means they will give the functional properties not only to the drug or the API, but also to the dosage form. So when we add excipient into a drug or in a dosage form, they are going to give us a certain functionality. So, and that functionality we can say is going to help us in one or the other ways. Or ultimately, it will affect the overall drug product performance in vivo. Means this will help in the performance of the drug in vivo. So whether it can increase or retire the performance of a drug depending on the nature of excipient which you have added, the amount of the excipient which you have added. But generally we add these excipients to have a specific function from the excipient itself. So this functional properties which are excipients are going to impart are mainly with an aim to improve, firstly, the manufacturability of the dosage form, then stabilize the drug against the degradation. Suppose if a drug is going to get degraded by the acidic pH or the any pH to where it is going to get exposed, we can make use of that, and we can prepare a dosage form which is more stable in nature. Then also to decrease the gastric irritation, control the rate of absorption of the drug from the absorption site. Means here we are going to control the rate of the drug which is coming out from the dosage form, okay, as well as the rate of drug absorption which is taking place from the absorption site. And one of the major ultimate aim of any excipient, mainly when we use it for oral dosage form or any other dosage form, is to increase the drug viability and etc. So these are some of the major functional properties which an excipient is will be improving, which we have seen just now. That is manufacturability of the dosage form, then stabilizing the drug product or making a stable product so that we can avoid the degradation, then decrease in the gastric irritation caused by the API, then control the rate of drug absorption from the absorption site and increase the drug viability. So as we are clear now, why we use excipients and what are the functional properties which this excipient gives. Now let's try to see some of the common examples of the excipients which are used in solid dosage forms. Now everyone know what do you mean by solid dosage forms. So we have various solid dosage forms. So it is tablet, then we have capsules, then we have powders. Okay. So these are some of the few examples, mainly the capsules, that is the hard gelatin capsules, okay, which are solid dosage forms. So in this solid dosage form, which are the common excipients which are used and which kind of properties or the function they are going to provide, that we are going to see one by one. Now, firstly, we have with us the excipients such as lactose. Now, lactose is mainly used in tablets as well as in capsules. Okay, even in powders, mainly as a diluent. Now, diluents are the agents which increase the bulk of the formulation. Then another example is of diabasic calcium phosphate, which is again used as diluent in the solid drug products. Then we have starch. Now, starch is an example of an excipient which is having two properties, which can place two properties. Now, one, it can be disintegrant or it can also be diluent. Then we have another example from the category of starch itself or from the category of cellulose, we can say, that is microcrystalline cellulose, MCC, which is again can be used as a disintegrant or diluent. Then the other types of excipients which are mainly used in solid dosage drug products includes a class called as lubricants. Now, from the class of lubricants, now what are these lubricants? These are the agents which help us for the normal functioning of the process. Mainly when you talk in terms of tableting. So when you have a proper lubrication of your machine, there are less chances that there will be fewer defects or no defects into your tablet which you're going to manufacture. So the example of the lubricants includes magnesium stearate, then we have stearic acid, then hydrogenated vegetable oils, which are also used as lubricant. Then we have talc also. So these are the example of the lubricants which are added in a solid dosage form so that the proper manufacturing of the tablet dosage form is done. Apart from this, the other excipients which are added, they include, firstly, we have the granulating agents which are added. This is the function which they are going to play or the property which they are going to provide. And the example of the excipients which are giving us this property of granulating agent includes sucrose, mainly the sucrose solution you are going to use. Then we have again the solution of PVP, that is polyvinyl pyrrolidone solution is used. Then we use HPMC, that is hydroxypropyl methyl cellulose, which is also called as hapromellose, and it's used as tablet coating agents. So it is a coating agent. Then we have other excipients such as titanium dioxide, which is combined with the dye as a coating colorant agent. Then methyl cellulose, it is again a coating agent, or it can also be acting as a granulating agent. Then we have CAP, that is cellulose acetate phthalate, which is used as enteric coating agent. Now apart from this, there are various excipients also which will impart a particular function to a dosage form. Now the point which we want to stress over here is, or I want to stress over here is that, so even though we have seen this extensive list of the excipients which are added in a dosage form, mainly the solid dosage form, they provide a certain function. Now what happens when you add this excipient into a formulation? They have added by keeping in mind a particular function. But there may be chances that due to the addition of this excipient, there is decrease in the solubility of the drug, or there may be the increase in the solubility of the drug. In short, it can hamper the overall viability of the drug. So we have to be careful before adding the excipient into a dosage form. Firstly, we have to see whether it is approved by the regulatory agency. Second thing, whether it is GRAS certified, that is generally regarded as safe or not. Then thirdly, we have to see whether it is whether it is compatible with the API and the other excipients which you have added into a dosage form. So these are some of the things which we have to look. Now let's move towards the next example of the excipients which I mainly use in the oral liquid drugs. Now oral liquid drugs means for your suspensions, okay, then for emulsions we have, okay, or for solutions, and which are given by oral route. Then we also have other categories of the drugs, for example elixirs, then we have syrups, okay. These are some of the drugs which are given, these are some of the dosage forms which are taken by oral route, and the form is in a liquid form. So here we are talking about the oral liquid drug products such as suspension, emulsions. So whether it is biphasic or monophasic, that's a total different thing. Here only we are talking about the excipients which are used in orally taken liquid drug products. Is it clear, students? Hello? Is it clear? Hello? Okay, moving towards the excipients from the category of orally taken liquid drug products. The excipients includes, firstly, we have sodium carboxymethyl cellulose, that is sodium CMC, which is used as suspending agent. The role is suspend. Then we have tragacan, which is a gum, which is again having its role in a dosage form as a suspending agent. Then sodium alginate, which is used as a suspending agent in suspensions. So all these three examples which we have seen, that is of sodium carboxymethyl cellulose, tragacan, sodium alginate, they are used as suspending agent in the formulation of suspensions. Then we have other gums such as xanthan gum, which is again a suspending agent, but it is a thixotropic suspending agent. Then we have bee gum, which is again a thixotropic suspending agent. Then as this liquid orals, they are taken by oral route many a times, we have to add a sweeteners so that we can overcome the test, or we can give a specific sweetness to the product. So the sweeteners which are used, such as we use sorbitol, okay. Then to protect the liquid formulation from degradation, we have to add sometimes preservatives. So we add preservatives such as alcohol. So this alcohol is also having an additional property of solubilizing agent, or we can say it is co-solvent. Then we have another example from the solubilizing agent, that is propylene glycol, which is mainly used for dissolving the drugs such as digoxin. Then we have other preservatives which are used as excipients such as methyl and propyl paraben. Then sweeteners, we can use sweeteners such as sucrose. Then surfactants such as polysorbates are used. Then specifically for oils, which are used in the formulation of emulsion, where when you're going to prepare WYO emulsion, we need oils as an vehicle. So that time we can use oils which comes from natural origin or the synthetically prepared oil also. So from natural oils, we have sesame oil and corn oil, which are used for emulsion as a emulsion vehicle. So I hope that we have seen the various examples from the excipients which are used for liquid oral also. Now, what is the important point here again? As I told you in the previous, after seeing the table for the excipients which are used for solid dosage form, the first thing is that these excipients, they should be approved. What they should be? They should be approved. Now, when we are saying that they should be approved, they should be approved by what? They should be approved by the regulatory agency. Now, when they are approved by a regulatory agency, it means their safety has been already proven. Okay. And then, or otherwise, we can also go for another term that is called as GRAS, that is generally regarded as safe. Okay. So these are the things which we have to see. And the third thing is that they should be compatible with the API and the other products which you are going to add into the product. Now coming to the other things related to the formulation factors affecting the drug product performance. Now excipient in the drug products may affect the dissolution kinetics of the drug. Means they can affect the dissolution profile of a drug. So it can be either by altering the media in which the drug is dissolved, or by reacting with the drug itself. Now there are two things. First thing, now suppose if in a dosage form, if I have added, everyone know that in dosage form we add a excipient. Now this excipient will react with the drug directly. Okay. Now when it will react with the drug directly, it can hamper the dissolution profile. This is the first path. Okay. Now what is the second path? Second path is that it can alter the dissolution kinetic of drug by altering the media. Now media means, now suppose if it can be the media which is present into the body, means inside, that is in vivo. If you're doing some in vitro test before there, so the in media also it can affect the dissolution kinetic of the drug. So it can be due to the alteration in the media in which the drug is dissolved, or by reacting with the drug itself. The excipients can affect the dissolution kinetics of the drug. Now, some of the more common manufacturing problems that are associated with the dissolution, or which will affect the dissolution, are listed in the table in the next slide. So I hope this point is very clear to everyone. So see, students, we should know that the excipient which you have added into a dosage form. Now suppose if this is the excipient which you have added into a dosage form, one of the either directly it will be reacting with the drug, or it will altering the media in which the drug is getting dissolving, and it will create or it will create some problems, or it will affect the dissolution kinetics or the dissolution profile of the drug, and ultimately it will affect the overall viability. Okay. I hope everyone can see this. Can anyone just read the first line for me? Hello. What is the heading of this? What is written in
The
this?
effect of excipients on the pharmacokinetic parameters of oral drug products.
Okay. Now, what exactly we are going to see means here we are going to nail the exact core of the today's lecture. That is, what is the effect of the excipients mainly on the pharmacokinetic parameters of the orally administered drug. Now we have the various categories of the excipients into the first column, in the excipient column, then the examples of the excipient which are used in the second column, then in the third, fourth, and fifth, we have the pharmacokinetic parameters. So first parameter is your Ka, that is absorption rate constant. Then we have Tmax, okay, time taken to achieve the maximum concentration by the drug. Then we have next parameter, that is UC, that is area under curve. Now let's try to understand this whole thing in a more detailed way. Now the first example is of disintegrant. Now the disintegrants, these are the brand names for the disintegrant. That is, we have Avicil, then we have Explotab. Now this disintegrant, when they are added, they have an effect on the pharmacokinetic parameters. So mainly when we talk in terms of absorption rate constant, there is an increase in the absorption rate constant because this disintegrants such as Avicil and Explotab, they are super disintegrant, we can say, or which increase the disintegration. So due to this, the absorption rate constant is increased. Then the time required to reach the maximum concentration will be decreased. Okay, and there is increase in the AUC also. Then for the second class of excipient, that is lubricants. Now we have seen some of the examples of the lubricants. For example, we have talc, then hydrogenated vegetable oils. Now what they do when we have a lubricants, now lubricants itself, they are oil in nature. So what will happen? So if you just compare this, you will find that the absorption rate constant value is reduced and Tmax is increased over here. Okay, and there is also decrease in the area under curve. Now when we talk about the coating agents, okay, for example, we have HPMC or other coating agents. Mainly here we are talking about HPMC. It does not have any effect on the pharmacokinetic parameters, be it Ka, be it Tmax, or be it area under curve. So it does not have, no effect is there on the pharmacokinetic parameters. Now when we talk about enteric coat, mainly of CAP, that is cellulose acetate phthalate, it will decrease the absorption rate constant, it will increase the Tmax, okay, and also it will lead to decrease in the area under curve. Then for sustained release agents such as methyl and ethyl cellulose, this will reduce the absorption rate constant, it will increase the Tmax, and there is decrease in the area under curve. Now for sustained release agents which are from the wax category or from waxic, which are waxy agents, for example, we have castor wax or we have carbo wax, there is decrease in the absorption rate constant, then Tmax is increased and AUC is reduced or decreased. Then for sustained release agents, mainly from the categories of the agents which are viscous or gummy in nature, for example, Vigum and Keltrol, there is decrease in the absorption rate constant and the Tmax will be increased and there is again decrease in the AUC. Now from this whole table which we have seen, it's quite, we can conclude in such a way that the excipient which you add into a formulation of a drug product will have an varying effect on the various pharmacokinetic parameters. And mainly here we are talking about the drugs products which are taken by oral route. So we have the arrows which are showing over here. Now so suppose the upward arrow means there is an increase. So you can see the example of disintegrant where when you use disintegrants such as Avicil or Explotab, there is increase in the Ka value. Okay. Then this is lower arrow, which talks about decrease in the parameter. Okay. Then we have equal to, okay, that is dash means it is equal to no effect, which we can see over here. Then K is your absorption rate constant, as I told you. This is your Ka, absorption rate constant. Then Tmax is the time for peak drug concentration for drug to achieve in plasma. And AUC is the area under the plasma drug concentration time curve. So I hope you people may have got some clear idea that how this excipients affects the pharmacokinetic parameters of a drug when they are taken by oral when the drug is taken by oral route. Now, moving further, now let's come to the next point, which is in continuation to the same point, that is specifically talking about the drug product performance in vitro, dissolution, and drug release testing. Now, firstly, what we have seen, we were talking about the factors which were affecting. Now, what we are seeing is, we are talking about a totally new point, that is the drug product performance in vitro, means outside the body, where we are going to perform this test. In vitro means not in a living tissue. So it can be your dissolution test apparatus, or it can be other test apparatus such as Frank diffusion cell. Okay. And not only this in vitro dissolution test, but also we are talking about the drug release testing. Now, before seeing this whole thing in detail, dissolution and drug release test are in vitro tests that measures mainly the rate and extent. So here what they are measuring? They are measuring two things. One is rate, means speed. Again, the same thing. That is, here we are talking about the speed. Rate means speed. Extent means amount. How much quantity or in how much amount the dissolution or the release of the drug substance has taken place from the drug product. I hope this point is clear to everyone. Hello.
Yes,
I
sir.
hope you all are there. So when we are testing the drug performance, mainly with the help of in vitro dissolution and the drug release testing, what are these tests? They are the in vitro tests, means outside the body, that will measure what? The rate and extent. Rate means the speed, extent means the amount of dissolution of the drug substance from the drug product, and usually in the aqueous media under specified conditions. So, as we have seen, dissolution and drug release tests are the tests which are in vitro tests, which will measure the rate, that is speed. Extent means the quantity of a drug dissolution or drug release from the drug product in the aqueous media under specific condition. Now, in vitro dissolution testing, they are helpful for us mainly to provide the information throughout the overall drug development process. So this in vitro dissolving testing will be an helpful tool to give us information throughout the drug development process. The dissolution test also serves as an important quality control procedure which is used to confirm the batch to batch reproducibility and to show typical variability in composition and the manufacturing parameter. So even though we know that in vitro dissolution testing there they will give us information regarding throughout the drug product or the drug development process, the dissolution test also will serve as an important quality control procedure to confirm the batch to batch reproducibility and to show typically variability in the composition and the manufacturing parameters. Now, the main purpose why we conduct this dissolution and the drug release test, it includes firstly the formulation development and selection, means which kind of formulation we have to prepare, then how we are going to develop it, then how we are going to select the various type of excipients. The whole things are done on the basis of the dissolution and the drug release test. Then also for the confirmation of batch to batch reproducibility, then to establish a drug product stability. So now suppose if I want to see if I have carried out the accelerated stability studies for the batch of the tablets which I have prepared, and afterwards I am doing the dissolution testing, and if I get a proper dissolution test values, then I can say the stability for my product has been maintained. So this dissolution as well as drug release tests, they are helpful in establishing the drug product stability. Then they are also, this test, they are also helpful in demonstrating that the product performs consistently throughout its use period or shelf life. Means this dissolution and drug release test demonstrate that the product performs consistently throughout its shelf life or its use period. Also, dissolution and drug release test helps in establishing the IB-IBC correlation, that is in vitro, sorry, that is in vivo in vitro correlation. Then they are also helpful in evaluating the biopharmaceutical implications of the product change rather than to require a bioequivalence studies. So dissolution and drug release tests, they are helpful in evaluating the biopharmaceutical implications of a drug rather than to go and carry out the bioequivalence studies. That is, they are mainly responsible for SUPAC. Now, SUPAC full form is scale up and post approval changes. So S stands for scale, U stands for up, P stands for post, A stands for approval, and C stands for changes. So this is scale up, post approval changes. So they are called as SUPAC. Now moving further, so just now we have seen why we carry out this drug dissolution or drug release testing. So this is mainly carried out for one of the following reasons which we have already seen. So the dissolution test should reflect the relevant changes in the drug formulation, in the drug product formulation, or the changes in the manufacturing process. So the basic aim whenever we carry out this dissolution testing is that it should reflect the relevant changes which are done in the drug product formulation and the changes in the manufacturing process that might affect the drug release characteristic and consequently or ultimately the in vivo performance. Now normally, even though this dissolution test, they reflect the whole things which are relevant to the changes which are done into the drug product formulation or the changes in the manufacturing process that may affect the drug release characteristic and consequently the in vivo performance, as we have already discussed. Ideally, the dissolution media or the dissolution method which is used for a particular drug product in vitro should mimic the release characteristics of a drug product in vivo. So this is an ideal situation. Means whatever test, now we know that we perform this in vitro dissolution test mainly where we perform it in a dissolution test apparatus. But is it possible for us to maintain the whole conditions or mimic means doing exactly maintaining the exactly the same conditions which are present inside the body? So it's not possible to maintain for us to each and every condition which is present inside the body, but and should potentially also be able to differentiate among the formulation with different release characteristics. See, ideally what we think is that now suppose if I am carrying out a dissolution test, okay, it should be mimicking all the things which are there, which will be present inside the body. So this all things we should be keeping in our mind, and it should also differentiate the different release characteristics which are shown by the different type of formulations. Now coming to the other things which are important to the dissolution test, when we carry out this in vitro dissolution studies, they are mainly used to carry out or often used to monitor the drug product stability. So as we have seen in the earlier part of this discussion, this drug dissolution studies or drug release studies are mainly used to see that we give a product which is more stable, as well as manufacturing process control also. Now in this case, the dissolution tests provide evidence that the drug product will perform consistently throughout its use period or shelf life. So once you carry out such a kind of test, this will give you a clear-cut indication that the drug product will perform consistently throughout its shelf life or the use period. Now coming to the important parameters related to the dissolution test. Again, dissolution test is not only useful for the quality control of the finished product, but also it provides an valuable information in the overall development of a formulation. That is, which salt form has to be used, then the selection of the excipient, etc. Which excipient we are going to select, why we are going to select. So dissolution test is answer for that also. So they are going to give us a more valuable information on the overall formulation development. A suitable dissolution method may uncover a formulation problem with a drug product that could result in the viability problem. Now what point I am trying to explain over here is that with the help of a suitable dissolution method, we can also overcome a problem, or it can reflect on a formulation problem within a drug product which can lead to an viability problem. So this we should know. Okay. Now coming to the another points related to dissolution. So each dissolution method is specific for a specific drug product and its formulation. So when developing an optimal dissolution parameters, so a variety of conditions has to be kept into a mind. That is, which type of apparatus you are going to use, which media you are going to use, at what temperature you are going to keep, and so on and so forth, should be explored. Then the ultimate goal is to be identified, and the dissolution test that is capable of distinguishing between the acceptable and unacceptable drug formulations are observed by different drug dissolution rate under the same experimental conditions. Overall, a suitable dissolution test should be able to reflect changes in the formulation, manufacturing process, physical and chemical characteristics of the drug, such as particle size, polymorph, and surface area. See, we can conclude in such a way that whenever we select a suitable dissolution test method, it should reflect the changes which are taking place, which are taking place in the formulation, okay, then the manufacturing process, physical and the chemical characteristics of a drug, then such as particle size, polymorphism, surface area. Now moving towards the next and the important point, that is when we talk about the USP dissolution test, it is an in vitro performance test which is applicable for many doses form such as tablets, capsules, transdermal suppositories, suspensions, etc. Now the development and the validation of the dissolution test is discussed in the general chapters of USP, that is United States Pharmacopoeia, which is discussed in the general chapters such as USP 711. Then we have USP 1092 and the other chapters from the USP. The dissolution process requires mainly the dissolution apparatus, the dissolution media, the test condition, means at what temperature you're going to keep it, what will be the rotation, all this thing that provide a method that is, or which should be discriminating, yet it should be sufficiently rugged, or it should be rugged in such a way, and also should be reproducible for day-to-day operations and capable of being transferred between laboratories. So this is what we should always keep in our mind. So whenever you are developing a dissolution procedure, this should be in such a way that this method should be discriminating, it should be sufficiently rugged, and should be reproducible for day-to-day operations, and it should have a capacity, or it should be capable of being transferred from one laboratory to another laboratory. Now, when we talk about the choice of apparatus and the dissolution media is based on the physicochemical characteristics of a drug, which includes mainly the solubility and the stability of the drug or the API, and the type of a dosage form or the formulation, whether the dosage form is immediate release or whether we have coated with the help of enteric coated tablets, whether it is extended release or it is a rapidly dissolving or any other dosage form. Now the development of an appropriate dissolution test requires the investigator to explore the different agitation rates, means at what RPM you're going to rotate it, and the different media, whether you're going to keep it in an acidic media or in phosphate buffer or simply in water, then the what amount, what volume will be there for this medium, then the pH of this medium, and the different kind of dissolution apparatus. Not only this, for specifically for the solid oral dosage form, USP apparatus 1 and apparatus 2 are the apparatus which are used most frequently. The dissolution test condition should be able to discriminate a change in the formulation that may affect the drug product performance. See, the main aim why we are studying is that how this dissolution as well as the drug release test, they affect the drug product performance that we are seeing. So for the development and the validation of dissolution and the drug release test, what is the most important thing is that we have to be careful in the developing of the dissolution test, where we have the person who's developing this test has to explore at what rate you're going to rotate the paddles or the basket, then which media you're going to use, how much will be the volume of that media, what pH you're going to use, which are the different kind of dissolution apparatus, whether you're going to use the official type of apparatus as per USP or non-official type. Now let's see this conditions that may affect or which affects the drug dissolution and the release. Now, as I told you, the first thing which we have to focus is the API or the drug, that is drug substance. So from drug substance, we have to firstly see the particle size, okay? Then we have polymorphism. If the drug is having more than one polymorph, then which polymorph you are going to you're going to use, whether the more soluble form or the form which is more active, okay? Then the surface area of the drug substance. Then the chemical stability in the dissolution media of your drug substance is also important. Then the conditions that may affect the drug dissolution and release related to the formulation of drug product includes excipients. It can be the various types of excipients which are adding in the formulation. Then we have medium. Medium is the media which you're going to use, or what will be the volume of that media, and the pH of the media, then molarity, whether you're going to add some co-solvent into this media or not, or you're going to add some surfactant or enzymes. For example, in stimulated gastric fluid media, we add sometimes enzymes also. Then the other parameters include the temperature of the media, then apparatus, which type of apparatus you're going to use, then hydrodynamics, okay, which then other condition includes the agitation rate, the shape of the dissolution vessel, the placement of tablet in vessel, means whether you're the position in which you want a tablet to be placed into the dissolution basket or we can say jar. Then the sinkers, these are mainly used for the floating products or the product that stick to the side of walls. So mainly the products which belong to the category of gastroretentive dosage form, okay, which will float on the media in the dissolution test jar. So that time we have to use sinkers. Now coming to the various type of apparatus. So this is the last table which we are going to see, and we'll stop over here, and the remaining things we'll be seeing afterwards. Now, as I told you, so this USP NFMIS, United States Pharmacopoeia National Formulary, and non-USP NF dissolution apparatus. So it means non-USP, that is United States Pharmacopoeia, NFMIS, National Formulary Dissolution Apparatus. Now we know these two apparatus, everyone know these two apparatus, apparatus 1 and apparatus 2. So as per USP, apparatus 1 is rotating basket and apparatus 2 is paddle. The method by which the agitation takes place in this method for apparatus 1, it is rotating stirrers, as well as in apparatus 2, it is again rotating stirrers. So apparatus 1 is mainly used for tablets and capsule. Apparatus 2 is used for tablet, capsules, and modified drug products, as well as for suspension. Now this apparatus 3, apparatus 4, 5, 6, 7, these are new for you. Okay. Now let's pay more attention over here. This is very, very important aspect. So this was the assignment which was given to you people on my side. Okay. Now, coming to this again, apparatus 3 is also known is known by the name reciprocating cylinder. The method for agitation is reciprocating. It is mainly used for extended release product. Now, why this whole classification is very important for you people? Because you people are doing masters in pharmaceutics. And if you don't know dissolution test apparatus as per USP and for which type of dosage form, which apparatus is used, then it is of no use. So for extended release products, which type of apparatus we are going to use? We are going to use apparatus 3, that is called as reciprocating cylinder. Then we have apparatus 4, which is called as flow through cell, where the agitation method is fluid movement. And this is used for the drug products in which the drug products containing low water soluble drugs are present. Then apparatus 5 is called as paddle over disc, where the agitation method is rotating stirrer, and it is used for the drug products such as transdermal drug products. Then apparatus 6 is cylinder type. The agitation method is rotating stirrer, and it is also used for transdermal drug products. Apparatus 7 is called as reciprocating disc, where the agitation method is reciprocation, and the drug product which are for which we use apparatus 7 are the extended release drug product. Now coming to another two methods which are non-USP NF methods. Which are those? The name of the apparatus is called as rotating bottle. That is, the name is non-USP NF, rotating bottle we can say, and it is used for extended release drug product, specifically for the beads. And now coming to diffusion, next apparatus that is called as diffusion cell, or it is called as France cell, which is also named as non-USP NF, and it is mainly used for transdermal drug products, ointments and creams. So I hope this is totally new for you people, but you can do one thing, you can take a screenshot of this slide, okay? And with this, we'll stop over here.